Hey, everybody, it's Ryan. Thanks for downloading today's show. And just a reminder, as always, Wake Up War Chant is brought to you by our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central and Township, in the heart of College Town. Right, ladies and gentlemen, from Tallahassee to Thomasville and from coast to Atlantic coast, it's time to Wake Up War Chant here on 97.9 ESPN Radio. And oh my goodness, it's so good to be talking to you. It's September the 13th, Wednesday, and it's a happy one to you and yours and anyone who's just ready that all this Irma garbage is over. You're currently listening to the voice of Ryan Kelly. I'm the director of digital media at warchant.com. And as I already said it, and I'll probably say it a couple other times today, it's just so good to be back on the air. It's so good to be talking with you. I hope you and your family are okay. I hope everything's smoothed over. I know here in Tallahassee, we were very lucky. Very, very lucky, because it looked like there was a time around Thursday nightish or Friday nightish or so that storm was pointed right towards us. And if it had been, it would have probably hit us as a 3 or a Cat 2, and that would not have been good, especially if you know anything about how Tallahassee dealt with a Cat 1 last year in Hermine. As a matter of fact, it was tropical force winds by the time it even hit Tallahassee. But Tallahassee gets a tropical storm in Irma. It does not impact us as much as I know it impacted a lot of our listeners, because I know we have folks who listen to us from everywhere. We talked about that last week, how many folks came up to us and said, you know, hey, I listen to you from Atlanta, or I listen to you from California. I know we've got listeners in South Florida. I know we've got listeners in Jacksonville. I know we have listeners in Tampa. And thoughts and prayers with you guys. I know that's cliche. I know how that feels, but you know, Jacksonville ended up getting a big brunt of this.
Hi, this is Ed West, Capital City Bank Market President for Leon County.
Jacksonville ended up getting a big brunt that it wasn't expecting, and a lot of flooding, of course. So I had my family to worry about on Monday, and thankfully they're all okay. I know I talked with Drew a little bit. He's going to join me a little bit later in this segment on the phone, and him and his family are doing okay. Everything seems to be fine, but hang in there. I'm happy it's over. No Florida State football this weekend to talk about, but we do have plenty of other things to talk about, including the fact that the Noles returned to practice yesterday. We also have the idea that Jimbo Fisher is going to finally speak with the media locally on Thursday. He'll have his teleconference today on Wednesday. So we'll hear from the head coach from then, how they're doing. Of course, we're going to hear from Ira Scheffel a little later on in the show, and he's going to talk a little bit about Florida State opening up the Champions Club to students who were in need of a meal, which is a very classy gesture. It was also the first time the Champions Club was full. So I wish I had the rim shot that ready to go, but I don't. But regardless of how this storm impacted you over the weekend, I'm just happy that we can come here and we can talk about football and we can goof off for an hour. And I'm very excited that we get to do it with you. And thanks so much, as always, for waking up with us here at 6 a.m. on 97.9 ESPN Radio or the TuneIn Radio app, the WTSM app. However it is you do it, we thank you so much. The iTunes, Podcast Republic, warchantradio.com, wherever it is you find the podcast, if that's how you listen to us. Thanks so much for that as well. Email is radio@warchant.com. @warchant is the Twitter account. We're going to do a Renegade Express today with Mr. Ira Scheffel, talk about some of the big questions surrounding FSU athletic. And as always, thanks to our friends from For the Table who help this thing go every day over there. Madison Social, Central and Township, all there in the heart of College Town. So hang on. We got a good show today. Even though there's no Florida State football this weekend, there's still plenty of things that will shape the reality for Florida State over these next couple weeks this weekend, and I can't wait to talk about them with you. But Drew and I felt it was important that you hear from both of us today because, of course, so much going on, so many families. I know some folks at 97.9 ended up evacuating, so everybody's kind of all over the place, but we all felt it was important to have a show today. Drew should be back either at the end of this week or the beginning of next week in studio with us, but until then, Drew wanted to come on, say hi, and I figured we would talk a little bit about some of the college football games that came on this weekend. So without further ado, joining us on the phone line, the co-host, the producer of Wake Up War Chant, Mr. Drew Hicken from stately Hicken Manor in Jacksonville. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
It's good to be here with you, buddy. I hope everything held up okay on your end, man.
Yep, just a little roof damage, nothing too bad. There was some flooding downtown, but we are far from all that stuff, so everything's good on our end.
Yeah, that was pretty much the same on our end, because I know you guys are more out towards the coast, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and my family's more out towards the west, and our old shed, which is honestly probably needed to come down for a couple years anyway, got torn to bits, and my sister lost a little bit of her fence. But other than that, yeah, it's kind of amazing that property-wise, nothing really happened. But wasn't that video on Tuesday of downtown Jacksonville just crazy?
Yeah, I mean, absurd. I mean, that landing probably could have used a good shower a long time ago, but I mean, goodness. I couldn't believe the flooding in there. I really didn't expect anything like that.
I think I speak for most people who love and have grown up in Jacksonville that if the floodwaters wanted to condemn the landing or maybe take it out in the St. John's, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But glad to hear from you, buddy. Just a couple things for you before we hit into why you were sleeping. But first of all, what the heck do you make of our first place Jacksonville Jaguars, sir?
Man, that was the most fun I've had watching a Jaguars game, and God knows how long. The energy from that defense and the fact that, Bortles didn't do anything to screw it up was great. And Fournette, way to welcome yourself to the league. Poor DB Kevin Johnson ran right over him about first play of the game.
Well, I think it's great. I'll never get this, and I know we've talked about this on the show before, but I think it's awesome that Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, and Leonard Fournette all had good weekends. I don't understand when people just look at guys in a loaded class and think, well, I want that one to be the one that sucks, or I want that one to be the one that fails. All three of those guys look really, really good, and I think Minnesota, Carolina, and Jacksonville are better for it.
Right. I was seeing a lot of slander about, Christian McCaffrey and whatnot. I mean, the guy had less touches than Leonard and Dalvin and still had nearly 100 yards, so he had himself a good game as well. Yeah,
and I mean, I'm rooting for all of them except Joe Mixon. Screw Joe Mixon. So that being said, I did want to bring you in. I figure if I got you, we may as well talk a little bit of football. I'm not going to catch you up on what we did last night, folks, but there was college football this weekend. Maybe not in the state of Florida, but there was college football, and I feel like I would be remiss if Drew and I didn't talk about it a little bit. This, ladies and gentlemen, is While You Were Sleeping.
Hello. Good morning.
Wake up! Wake up! Wake me up! Good morning. Good morning.
What happened last night?
Let's start in South Carolina, where Clemson is victorious over Auburn 14-6 in a game that, to a certain extent, was just as ugly as the one that got played a year ago, Drew. Kelly Bryant, 19 of 29, 181 yards. It wasn't a great game for Clemson offensively. That Auburn defense is certainly as good as advertised. Jarrett Stidham, on the other hand, he was 13 of 24 for 79 yards. He was sacked. It was 10 or 11 times. I know that much. But it seemed like they passed the ball more because Auburn, for whatever reason, decided that even though they were running the ball well, they just weren't going to do it.
Right. From where we thought, that game was about just what you expected, an ugly defensive game. But I will say this, if you look at it from a Knowles standpoint, you got to come away feeling pretty positive that you could at least have a shot against that Clemson team.
Oh, absolutely. Defensively, that's going to be a very, very good game between two quarterbacks that are kind of finding their way. They'll be a little bit better by then, but yeah, I'm with you. I think this division looks inherently winnable, especially when you saw what Louisville's defense did, even though Louisville offensively, I mean, what was it, over 700 yards of offense against North Carolina as they kind of floated to a win and ended up covering those 10 points?
Right. Lamar Jackson's going to Lamar Jackson at the end of the day. I mean, he is as good as advertised. It's kind of crazy to me that so many people have stopped talking about him through this offseason. He's quickly reminded them throughout 2 weeks of the season. But, yeah, their defense, they have a lot of problems on defense. Louisville is still a team that can give you some issues, but there's just so many other problems on their team. Without Lamar Jackson, I'm not really sure what they have.
Georgia defeats Notre Dame in a game that may as well have been played at a neutral site, 20-19. A lot of dog faithful up in South Bend. And Georgia's defense, they look pretty legit, man.
Yeah, that's a game that Georgia wouldn't have won in years past. So, they're definitely making some progress over there. Selfishly, I kind of wanted Notre Dame to win that game because I just think about the Justin Fields front every time I see them play now. But, it was a good game. Defensive struggle as well. Southern California, the real USC, all over
Stanford last weekend, 42-24. I think people were nervous after that first week, but I think we can actually say it. I know it's only week 2, but this USC team picked up right where they left off. They're the best team out west, and I would be shocked if they don't make it to the college football playoff.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't overreact too much in 1 week. And I think a lot of people wanted to pick Stanford in that game because of USC's recent struggles with them. I think Stanford won at least 7 out of the last 9, something crazy like that. So it was definitely a big step for them, I think, to get over that hump and take it to Stanford a little bit. I think they are as good as advertised as well.
Sam Darnold ended up throwing 2 picks in that game, but when you go 21 of 26, 316 yards and 4 touches, you can sometimes afford to have a turnover every now and then. That's not bad at all. Not a bad day at the office. And finally, kind of the surprise of the weekend, I don't think people would have been shocked if Oklahoma beat Ohio State. But that score, man, that is absolutely insane to see that final from Oklahoma, pretty much doubling up Ohio State in Ohio Stadium, 31-16. Is Oklahoma for real? Is this the team? Is this finally the year? Is it Bob Stoops? Was he the problem of big games? Is that it? Is Lincoln Riley legit, or did this team just have a chip on their shoulder? What do you think?
Right. I mean, it's just crazy to think that Lincoln Riley in his first big college football game as a head coach goes into the Horseshoe and beats Urban Meyer. That's no small feat. So I think they're definitely a player that you have to take seriously in the college football playoff, the scheme of things.
Baker Mayfield stabbing midfield with the flag. Do you think if it was any other player other than the glorified Midwest white boy that people would have been a little bit more upset about it than they were?
I think that you could say that if Jameis Winston had done that, there would have been a full special on ESPN about how bad of a kid he was. So I'll leave it at that.
But it's okay because it's Baker Mayfield, and he's just a gamer, and he's just a gritty player, and he just loves to play the game, Drew. He loves to play the game. That's just kind of the guy he is. Sneaky game, I don't know if you got a chance to watch it, but this is the last one I'll touch on over the weekend. Oregon, 42-35 over Nebraska. They had a pretty big lead, and Nebraska chipped away. I don't know if you got a chance to watch it. I don't know how much it's going to mean at the end of the year, but it was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I honestly was watching the game a little bit just because I know we picked on it in the Lucky 7 spread-wise, and I saw Oregon was up 42-14, and I said, oh, dear. Guess maybe I should have gone with the Ducks, but you saw Nebraska come storming back there late. I think the final was 42-35. So, yeah, good game.
Drew, thanks so much for calling me, buddy. We'll talk soon, my friend. Good to hear from you.
Yep, you too, man.
Happy you're safe, man. There's more on the other end. Ira Shafel joins us on Wake Up War Chant, 97.9 ESPN Radio. Few things can get you in a better mood than the Doobie Brothers as we roll along here on Wake Up War Chant, 97.9 ESPN Radio. Ryan Kelly here with you. Irish Fell's going to join us here in a second. Of course, as always, we're brought to you by our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central, and Township, all there in the heart of College Town. As we mentioned, Florida State stepped up to the plate in a pretty big way on Monday and fed a lot of kids inside the Champions Club. And, of course, I made the easy joke, Ira Shafel, who's joining us on the phone line, that it was maybe the first time the Champions Club was full.
I think that inside the Champions Club is usually pretty full. It's just getting them out in the seats. But, yeah, no, it's a good point. But, no, it was yeah, man, it was a pretty cool event. You know, again, I think that, FSU, John Thrasher, again, since he's been president, seems to really have a good feel for how to handle crises and how to handle different situations. And this is, one more look. I mean, I'm sure some of our listeners have kids who are in the dorms over the weekend. I know a friend of mine from back home, from a guy I grew up with, his daughter, she's in the Marching Chiefs, and she stayed up here and was staying in the dorms, and he was asking me to check on her throughout the weekend and make sure she didn't need anything. And it's tough for parents. So I thought, the administration did a really good job of doing things to try to, make them feel comfortable as much as they could. And it was really cool, as it relates to why we covered the story, that, several of the FSU student athletes with baseball, basketball, and football teams went out to help out and serve meals and do all that. And I thought it was just times like this kind of brings people together, and I thought FSU really showed that.
Yeah, they really did. And, of course, the idea that, you mentioned the football team was out there. I saw a lot of photos of the basketball team out there. I know just about every sport seemed to be represented. And the fact that folks were able to come together, do something like that. Because like you said, I mean, for some kids, especially I know South Florida and the kids coming from in-state and even North Florida, they've been through hurricanes, they've been through storms. But for a lot of them, this is the first time they've dealt with it alone. And there are a lot of kids who are coming from out of state as well who've never had to deal with something like this. So the idea that everybody was able to come together, I think just the idea of human interaction after something like that is such a big deal. The fact that people are talking and communicating with each other and they're able to laugh and joke after, let's face it, a lot of the kids who were up in that Champions Club were scared out of their mind on Sunday night and Monday morning.
Well, think about back to when you were a freshman. I mean, I have to think back a little bit further to think when I was a freshman, but it's, you just remember like not knowing how to do your laundry, not knowing how to shop, how to do grocery shopping, just all the little things that, you kind of counted on your family to help you with. And to then be in a situation like that where, is it okay when the storm dies down? Is it okay to go outside or do we have to wait? Is this the eye or is this, is more coming? And, these things that, we all have, if you live through these experiences, you have a better feel for it. But these kids are all kind of going through it for the first time. And you're right. I mean, listening to the conversation, as a reporter, when you go cover something like that, you kind of, a lot of times just kind of watch and listen. And I stood there and was listening to, I think it was Cyrus Fagan, one of the young defensive backs on the football team, talking to some students, where are you from? What high school did you go to? Just casual conversations that, it's trivial. It's not a big deal. But truthfully, a lot of times, a lot of these students don't interact that much with student athletes. They see them on TV, they cheer for them at the games. They might have them in classes, but I remember back when I was in school, you didn't necessarily just go up to a star football player and just start having a conversation. Sometimes people do, but sometimes they don't. And it was cool, kind of, for them to see each other. And I think the quote from I think Leonard Hamilton, or I think it was Leonard Hamilton I was talking to. And he said, it's just good for them to see that we're all in this together, that we're all just people trying to get through and kind of make it. And thankfully, the storm didn't turn out to be as bad as it could have been in Tallahassee as it was in other parts of the state. And some of those kids had to think about their families back home. I mean, if they had families in Jacksonville or Orlando or South Florida, where Fort Myers, where they really got hit, they might have had that on their mind. So just kind of getting out and having some companionship, I think, was really good.
And on top of all that, you mentioned it. That was kind of my challenge over the weekend, Ira. It was the idea that, yay, that's great. The hurricane doesn't look like it's coming towards Tallahassee, and now it's barreling right towards my family. And it's one of those things where you don't know how to feel other than you just kind of stay in a constant state of worrying to a certain extent. But like you said, it's just good to have other people. It's good to have each other. And I know for a fact the FSU basketball team and the baseball team had each other. The basketball team all stayed together with Coach Hamilton and his family at the BTC, and the baseball team all stayed together at the clubhouse, right?
Yeah, they did, inside Dick Howser Stadium. And they didn't the whole coaching staff, I think Mike Martin Jr. was the only coach to stay there. Basically, he told the other coaches that he would handle it because, he wanted them to be with their families and their kids and, be at their houses. So it was basically Mike Martin Jr. and 22 players. He said it was like a frat house. He kept having to yell at the guys to go to sleep because they just wanted to talk and play cards and goof around. And, I think it was, again, I thought it was a really a different approach, I think maybe a little bit for FSU. This is something that they haven't really done before. Thankfully, not that many storms have been planned, or have been projected to come to Tallahassee for so long to where they had time to really plan it out. But, and I think the football team, most of those guys stayed at the Moore Center. I think with the baseball team, they gave their players the option of going home if they could get home in time, or back, wherever they're from, if they could be with their families, or to stay in Tallahassee. But if they stayed in Tallahassee, they had to stay with the team. The basketball team, they all basically were told they had to stay together at the basketball training facility. And then some of the other teams were allowed to leave town. I think that's kind of why there weren't more teams participating in that event. That dinner was because I believe the women's basketball team, soccer team, a couple of the other teams either were scheduled to be going on the road soon, so they just went ahead and got on the road early, or they took the time to say, okay, you know what, let's take the team to this city out of the storm's path and practice and work out and do things there because we wouldn't be able to do it here. So, and again, I think, FSU's administration deserves some credit for Stan Wilcox and his staff for kind of taking a unique approach to it and letting each coach kind of figure out what made the most sense for their program.
So I knew about the basketball team and I knew about the baseball team, but you said most of the football team stayed in Moore?
Yeah, I believe so. In the football throughout the building, I think they had air mattresses and did everything. We didn't get to talk to Jimbo Fisher, so again, I didn't really include that in the story, but that's what I was told, was that the football players stayed at the Moore Center. The big thing was, they just didn't know, they didn't want some of these kids to, do anything silly, go outside during the storm, or if the storm got really bad. And, not all those guys live in the same building. Some of them live in new apartments, some live in older apartments, some live in houses. And they wanted to have control to kind of know that, they're taking responsibility for these kids when they're on campus. And I think the idea of getting them inside of these athletic department structures, they felt a little bit safer than letting them fend for themselves.
All right, so logistics side, Ira, let's talk business. We'll talk football first. FSU ended up back on the practice field Tuesday. It looks like they're going to kind of get in the normal groove of things as well. But I also know on Tuesday, FAMU also used the FSU IPF. Yeah,
that's kind of interesting. I think one of the things we kind of gets under publicized is that the indoor practice facility. Everybody knows it as the football indoor practice facility, but FSU has always done a really good job since they've had it. And Jimbo Fisher and his staff have been very good about working with the other programs. You'll see the cheerleaders use it when they've got bad weather. The soccer team has used it before when they've had bad. The baseball teams used it. I think basically any team that doesn't have an indoor facility, obviously volleyball does, and obviously I think swimming and tennis do. But a lot of those other sports, when they need a place to go inside, they use the indoor practice facility. This is the first time that I know of that FSU's kind of opened it up to another program in town. FAMU's football team came over and used it after FSU was done. And I think, again, I think it was a really nice gesture because FAMU, especially because of the reason that FAMU needed it, was because basically their facilities were being tied up with FEMA and their emergency response, vehicles and things like that. So they needed a place, and FSU let them come over. So that was a really cool gesture. And like you said, FSU hadn't practiced in almost a week. They practiced last Thursday. It's like it's 5 days. They weren't able to practice over the weekend. And then, obviously the storm came through Monday, so they couldn't practice. So they finally got back out there yesterday. And today we'll get to talk to Jimbo and hear a little bit more about how the team has responded.
And, of course, I'm pretty sure, like you said, most of those parking lots around Bragg Memorial and, of course, even the Lawson Center was being used to lodge first responders over at FAMU. So a bang-up job to Rattler Nation over there, and a lot of good stuff going on just in the city as usual. Elsewhere, though, I know FSU soccer, scheduling-wise, outside of football and volleyball, I know volleyball had their game moved against Florida, and the women's soccer team also had their game moved against Florida. They ended up having to play at Troy yesterday compared to actually playing at the Plex where they were supposed to be.
Yeah, and that's where I think if I'm correct, I think they went to either somewhere in Alabama or Mississippi during the few days during the leading up to that to kind of get out of harm's way so that they got a place to practice. And again, I think that Mark Krikorian and his staff, that's a super, a lot of, casual FSU fans are huge football fans, maybe basketball, maybe baseball fans. The soccer community knows that, that soccer program is as good as it gets across the country. And, and again, I think that they didn't want, just like the football staff or the baseball or basketball staff wouldn't want to leave any stone unturned, helping their performance. Mark Krikorian's the same way. So, yeah, they went over there and kind of got some opportunity to practice before they went and played that game.
It's not often we do get to say that, Ira, so I will definitely go on record saying Mark Krikorian is as thorough and by the book as it gets. And if somebody was going to be prepared for a situation like this, it was going to be him and his program.
Yeah, no question. I mean, you can't. That's again, it's kind of, we don't get to talk about it as much probably on War Chant or warchant.com because so many of our readers really are hyper-focused on the big sports. But, this campus, man, you talk about Mark Krikorian. I mean, that is as big as it gets in college women's soccer. Trey Jones, his golfers, the golfers he's produced that are now doing such a great job on the PGA Tour. Dwayne Hultquist with tennis. I mean, it's just across the board. FSU's got just incredible coaches, and again, during times like this, you kind of see how good those guys are.
So overall, to wrap it up, Ira, everyone's accounted for. Everyone got through the storm okay, and we're getting pretty close to business as usual. Yeah,
that's you hope. I think fans and certainly the media, and I'm sure the players and coaches are kind of chomping in the bit. You get started with such a big game, and then you have a few days off, and then you expect to have another game, and that gets postponed, and then the Miami game gets postponed, Louisiana Monroe got canceled. Miami gets postponed, and now you're sitting here basically 2 or 3 weeks without a game. So it's going to be trying again, I think, this weekend. But like you said, as far as the team goes, yeah, they got back at it. It's in some ways, I think it could be a good thing for them. I mean, this is almost like another preseason camp, especially with you have a new starting quarterback in James Blackman. We actually have a piece on the site at War Chant, our roundtable piece, where we kind of discuss this hiatus and how it could affect the team and how Jimbo Fisher and his staff are going to handle it. So, it's interesting. But, yeah, I think on Saturday, fans were jonesing for some football, and they will be again this Saturday.
You ended up answering the question I didn't even end up having to ask, Ira, but we do have plenty of football questions that came in for the Renegade Express, and Ira and I will try our best to answer those right after this on Wake Up War Chant, 97.9 ESPN Radio.
Yes, Florida State just landed a 5-star commitment.
I don't see that anywhere online. How did you get that news so fast?
I'm on the new warchant.com app. I get news updates and scores pushed to my phone instantly.
How much does it cost?
It's free. Just go to iTunes or the Google Play Store, type in Warchant, and install it on your phone. That's it.
A free app that keeps me constantly up to date on Florida State sports and recruiting? Wow, that makes it incredibly easy to follow my Seminoles and never miss out.
With the app, you'll also get quick access to all the stories and features on War Chant, including the ever-popular message boards that feature thousands of fans talking about the Noles.
Warchant.com, your ultimate Seminole source.
The Renegade Express, ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to roll. Your questions have been sent in all day on Tuesday. Irish Fella and I have picked the best ones. Well, at least the ones we can get to, because we get a lot of good ones. And I'm not just saying that. We do struggle when we try to put these questions together when we've only got a certain amount of time. But it is football season, and so there's not always a ton of time. We might actually do one tomorrow since there's no football, and we'd like to churn out as much football content as possible for you because I know that's what you're looking for here in the fall. But first of all, let's hit this because we have, like I said, a bunch of good questions. Ira, we had Ryan on last week. We had you on the week before, but there's plenty of good football questions. But first of all, I will ask you one that was asked by a couple different folks. And I know we kind of answered this on Friday, but I just want to make sure everybody gets this again. Was it the right call to move the Miami game? I think the answer is unequivocally still yes.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, I think, for the, 2 or 3, several reasons. Number one, you always kind of need to, you hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And they had to really prepare for the worst. And look, South Florida did get hit really hard. And, whereas FSU hasn't practiced since last Thursday, Miami hadn't practiced since last Tuesday. So, when they get back in it, they'll have literally missed a full week. And then they would only have a couple practices before they have to get on the road to come up here. I just think that would be unfair. It's such a big game. It's such an important game for both teams. And, I think they made the only decision. And then when the fact that you had both those teams having that bye week on October 7th, to me, it was almost a no-brainer.
Townie1 wants to know, Ira, Jimbo has stated that teams don't block out punts anymore because it's too hard to do, in response to why FSU rarely goes to block a kick. Is this really a trend in college ball? It seems like teams still go for the block on us, NC State in 2012, which led to us getting upset, and Bama this year. Also, numerous block kicks against us. Well, statistics do say, what is it, a 91% chance that you lose the game if you have a punt blocked?
Yeah, I don't know the exact number. I know it's a huge.
It's close
number.
to that.
Yeah, and no, it's funny that 2012 NC State game is something that I remember at the time because Jimbo had said that several times before that game that that was kind of the reason that FSU didn't do a whole lot of going after punts. They do sometimes. It's not accurate to say they don't ever. I think as a practice, the days of the back in the day when you think about FSU, there were. Bobby Butler and some of the teams FSU had back historically blocked a ton of punts, and they would come after. It seemed like every punt. They were coming after it, they're not blocked as often as they used to be. I think that punt teams are much better at protecting, but I do think FSU does it occasionally. But no, it's clearly not been something that they put a huge emphasis on, and it's a fair question because it has happened to FSU a couple times. Clearly, Alabama blocks kicks and blocks punts. They do a very good job at it. It's something they put a lot of effort on. And it's kind of surprising a little bit that Jimbo, FSU did have the big block of the field goal against Miami last year. But that wasn't really a scheme thing. It just seemed like, Miami's line broke down. DeMarcus Walker got in there. I think it's a fair criticism that, FSU maybe should try to do a little bit more when you have the kind of athletes FSU has. You would think you'd be able to get to some more. They do try it some, but not as much as people would like.
Running Knoll, our old friends over the Jacksonville Seminole Club, wants to know, how is DeAndre recuperating, and how did the team fare during Irma? Okay, so we already answered the second half of that question, but what have you heard about DeAndre Francois, Ira?
I think from talking to the players early after the surgery, the day or two after the surgery, they said that it was taking a toll on him. It was obviously very kind of frustrating, and I wouldn't say devastating, but definitely it's tough. I mean, you think about all the work that he put in during the off season, all the time he spent coordinating 7-on-7 workouts, working on his film study and everything he had to do to have the kind of season he was hoping to have, then to not really play well in the second half of that game, then to lose the rest of the season. It had to be frustrating. Anybody would be devastated by it. But Jimbo said that, they had some conversations late last week, and he probably wouldn't have been at the game against Louisiana Monroe if that game had happened. If he was, he might have been in the press box. But Jimbo did say that he had conversations with DeAndre, and DeAndre does want to be around the team, kind of like Derwin James was last year. And one of the things that it kind of got lost Thursday, because not long after we talked to Jimbo that night, I guess we talked to Jimbo around 6:30, and I think by 8:30 the game was canceled. But one of the interesting things Jimbo said was that Derwin is probably 10 times the player now that he would have been last year, by sitting out, by watching things, by seeing how things are coached, why the coaches do what they do, why scheme-wise FSU does certain things that they do. And, he's hopeful that DeAndre will, use this time the same way, and he'll really grow. Again, you don't want to say there's anything positive to come from a season-ending injury, but if there is a silver lining, it could be that. So they're really looking forward to having DeAndre around the team in the meeting rooms, kind of helping, maybe even help coach James Blackman a little bit.
Question that got asked on the Tribal Council and on Twitter, Ira. Do you know anything about the state of Miami staff and their facilities at the moment?
The last I had heard was that they, that they came through it okay in facilities-wise, but I think the biggest issue was just getting the, players back and getting them, just kind of getting everything back. And I wouldn't say taking roll, but just, all those players that are from South Florida or different parts of the state had different impacts on their families, and those players went home. I'm pretty sure Miami's players basically, once they knew it was coming, they kind of disbanded, and they were able to kind of go and spend time with their families. They weren't asked to just kind of stay on campus. So I think it was a matter of kind of reconvening and getting back together. But I think they're kind of starting from scratch this week. I mean, I don't think, whereas the FSU football team, my guess is even though FSU couldn't practice really over the weekend because of the threat of the storm, I'm sure that they were in the meeting rooms and film rooms and really kind of breaking things down. I don't know that Miami had that luxury, so I think they're going to be a little bit longer to kind of get back on track.
Wes Duval wants to know, how does having such an early bye week affect a team more than it normally would, having a bye week in the middle of the season?
I think the biggest concern really is just the in terms of needing that time to recuperate from injuries. I think there's something to be said for the kind of the mental toll of a season. You talk about playing 11, 12 straight games. But I think the biggest thing, and I think where Jimbo probably is not happy about this whole thing is ideally you'd love to have a bye week in October, November to kind of really heal up for the stretch run. Just having that week off is huge, but they're not going to have it now. And I think that what you're going to see is you're going to see Jimbo kind of take an NFL approach, which they've done before. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, they had 9 straight games, and this will be 11 straight games. And I think what Jimbo did in that situation was they really kind of scaled back the contact in practices, especially for the older guys. They might hit less. Usually Tuesday's a huge hitting day, and Wednesday's still a pretty big hitting day. Maybe they kind of tone those days back a little bit and really focus on the mental side, because you just can't play 11 straight weeks with the roster sizes they have now and hit, extensively during the week and then also play those games. So I think they'll probably change how they approach practice a little bit.
I think the other thing that people really don't talk about when talking about moving that game, Ira, is remember October was supposed to be the 1 month that Florida State kind of had it easy. They had their one test with Louisville, but Wake, Duke, a bye, you kind of feel like you can navigate it pretty well if you can just take care of the cards in the middle. Well, now it's Wake, Miami, Duke, Louisville, back to back to back to back to back. And
Wake and Duke have looked pretty. They're not going to be world beaters, but they look better than.
They're going to present a game for you. They're not going to lay down.
Yeah, they don't look like doormats.
Yeah, and overall, I think that just makes this entire schedule a lot meatier rather than just having that lull in the middle. And like you said, I mean, I told you, man, at the beginning of the year, you raised an eyebrow when I said Wake's going to be a decently tougher game than some folks thought. But if there's one thing I've learned, and again, I know I do this a lot whenever I bring up Wake, but Dave Clawson can coach, man. They know what they're doing over there.
I think that's fair, and you're right. And I did maybe scoff a little bit, but I think that they look pretty formidable. I mean, we'll see how they. One of the challenges for Wake, just because a lot of times, just like Duke, a lot of times maybe their top 11 or 12 on offense, 11 or 12 on defense may be pretty solid, but they don't have the depth. And as you go deeper into the season, sometimes it seems like they start falling apart a little bit, just because they don't have the depth overall, the quality of depth to withstand injuries that come during the course of a season.
We're pretty much out of time, so I don't really have time to ask any more of these, but I might get back to them, especially if we do another Renegade Express tomorrow. Ira, we've gotten to watch a little bit more football outside of FSU football than we usually do throughout 2 weeks. Who's impressed you the most?
Probably Clemson. I want to see more. I'm not 100% sold on Clemson's defense, but 11 sacks is crazy. Granted, I think Auburn's got some issues, and I'm not sure that that quarterback's going to be what they hoped he was going to be. But 11 sacks is still crazy. I think what it shows is that they've certainly they're closer to reloading than they certainly are rebuilding. I'm not sold on the offense yet, and this is going to be a big game this week. Louisville, obviously the offense is spectacular, but I want to see what they do against a real good competition. I can't wait to watch that game this weekend. I just think we're going to have a much better idea of those two teams after we see them on the field together.
More than anything to me, Ira, real quick, I thought Auburn's play calling was absolutely just appalling. It seemed like they had decent success running the ball every time they did it, and for whatever reason, let's throw, especially late in the game, but it's a one-score game.
Oh, and that was the thing. I saw the stat about how few sacks Auburn gave up over a course of several seasons under Malzahn, and how they had 11 in one game, and it's like, Yeah, because they didn't used to just drop back and try to throw it that much. I don't know what they're doing. This is not what they built their success on there.
You can lay that L, as good as Clemson's D is, you can lay that L right at the feet of Gus Malzahn. Thank you very much, Ira. We got to run, buddy.
Thanks, Ryan. Take care.
We're putting a bow on it after this as Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio. Putting a bow on it here, Wake Up War Chant, 97.9 ESPN Radio. Thanks to Ira and thanks to Drew for joining us. And thank you. I may have said this at the top of the show, but I feel like it's worth saying it again. All the folks who tweeted at us and said they missed us and were ready for us to get back on the air. It's always appreciated. And, we're human. It's good to be liked. And the fact that you guys have reached out so much over the last couple days and have said, we're just ready to hear about some football again. Of course, I've always said it. Sports are part of a historical part of our culture. And I'm not trying to make it more significant than it is, because at the end of the day, we are in the distraction business. Those of us in the sports media, a lot of times at the end of the day, we just want a game to get our mind off politics or get our mind off our work or our lives or something like that. And sports often finds an outlet for that. And that's not to say social issues don't come up in sports. That's not to say political issues don't come up in sports. And that's not to say they don't have their place there. But I understand when people want an escape from things. So it's just good to be back, business as usual, as we wrap it up here and send ourselves on just a couple more days and we've got football again. I mean, heck, technically we've got football on Thursday. I know on the pro side, we got the Texans and we got the Bengals. But overall, before we go, I did want to say something. And I hate to end this on a downer, but I hope you and your family are doing fine. And I hope your family is okay. I hope your property is okay more than anything. But today, while you're out and about, just remember the folks in the islands. Remember the folks in Barbuda and the folks in Turks and Caicos and Cuba who maybe aren't as lucky as we are right now, who maybe don't have the well-built homes that we had, who got far worse of a brunt of this storm than we did, many of whom who were already living in poverty, who don't have a house to wake up to today. Remember them. Remember the people who do have significant damage, the people who do have to rebuild their lives, the people who have lost their lives. There were, I believe it was 7 reported yesterday, people who didn't make it out of this hurricane alive. Keep them in your thoughts. Be willing to help. Be willing to donate to the Red Cross your time to rebuilding efforts, whatever it takes, because there's so much talk about what divides us, and there's so much talk about how divided this country is and how much none of us can stand each other, and that's not what I saw over the weekend. And I hope that's not what you saw either. You saw people who were willing to help people, not because they were Republicans or Democrats or Americans or what race they were, or how tall they were, or where they went to school. You saw people willing to help people because they were people. And that's a great thing. Mike and Mike's up next, 97.9 ESPN Radio.
WarChant.com is the ultimate inside source for FSU football and recruiting. And now you can get in on the action for free for an entire month. WarChant.com is offering a risk-free 30-day trial subscription. Get full access to the #1 website covering the Seminoles just by entering the promo code WarChant30. That's WarChant30. Sign up and get in on the world's most active FSU message boards. Receive breaking news, stories from our award-winning staff, plus get exclusive interviews and videos. Just enter the promo code WarChant30. WarChant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.
Hey, thanks for downloading today's show. If you haven't already, why don't you rate and subscribe us? We certainly do appreciate it, and of course, we appreciate you listening anyway, so just go ahead and click that right there. You know you want to. Come on. Come on. Thanks again for letting us do the show. We love giving you all the football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, all year round. Not just football season,
not just spring practice, but hopefully giving you the freshest and newest FSU content every day. Thanks, guys.